The young Pakled girl screamed as the alien thugs pummeled her frail body, their vicious taunts echoing in the dingy alley. "Worthless idiot! You Pakleds are all the same, stupid and useless." Battle-hardened human marine Jake Reed patrolled the seedy underbelly of the Pakled city, part of a joint peacekeeping force on planet Zarthax. The guttural cries made him freeze in his tracks. Peering into the alley, fury boiled in his veins at the sight of the vicious beating. Without hesitation, Jake charged into the fray, his combat training kicking in. Fists flying, he made short work of the assailants, his own blood spattering the grimy walls. The thugs scattered like cockroaches, hurling curses in alien tongues. Kneeling beside the battered girl, Jake tried to assess her injuries. She cowered in terror, whimpering. Disgust twisted his gut as passing aliens shot him looks of contempt. "Leave it be, human. Pakleds are a lost cause, especially that defective runt. She's better off dead," a four-armed Zarthaxian spat. Jake gritted his teeth, bile rising in his throat. How could they be so callous toward an innocent child? He knew Pakleds were considered dim-witted, but this was cruelty, plain and simple. Pushing aside the rage, Jake softened his voice. "Hey there, little one. I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help." Huge, fearful eyes met his. Slowly, trembling, she uncurled from her protective ball. Jake's heart clenched as he took in her deformities, the scars of abuse and neglect marring her body. With patience and compassion, he coaxed out her story between hitching sobs. Orphaned, ostracized, abused. It hit too close to home, dredging up memories of his own nightmare childhood in Earth's foster system. The pain, the loneliness, until the military gave him purpose and a new family. His squad would think him crazy. The alien peacekeepers already viewed humans as volatile, looking down on their mammalian instincts. Didn't they see? It was their humanity, their compassion, that set them apart. Gently scooping up the girl, Jake made a silent vow. No matter the cost to his reputation or the fragile alliance, he would protect her. Rigor. That was her name. She clung to him like he was her only lifeline in a cruel universe. As Jake tended to Rhaegar over the following days, a spark ignited within, flickers of untapped intelligence in her eyes. Could it be the galaxy had judged her kind too harshly? If he was right, if Pakleds were more than meets the eye, it would turn centuries of prejudice on its head and paint a target on his back. But looking at Rhaegar's trusting face, Jake knew he'd storm the gates of hell itself to keep her safe, for in her he saw a chance for redemption, for himself and the Pakleds. Little did he know, his act of kindness was the pebble that would trigger an avalanche of change, a battle for the soul of a species. And it all began with the two words everyone least expected to hear from an alien child. "Thank you." As Jake took Rhaegar under his wing, he faced a barrage of scorn and derision from all sides. The peacekeeping forces, both human and alien, saw his actions as a foolish waste of time and resources. "You've lost your mind, Reed," Sergeant Dex snarled, his face inches from Jake's. "Those Pakleds are a lost cause. They're too dumb to even tie their own shoelaces, let alone amount to anything. You're jeopardizing our mission for what, some broken runt?" Jake stood his ground, unflinching. "I'm doing what's right, Sarge. Rhaegar deserves a chance, just like anyone else. The Pakleds aren't what we think they are." Dex scoffed. "You're a disgrace to the uniform. I ought to report you to the commander." But Jake refused to back down. He saw in Rhaegar a glimmer of untapped potential, a spark that could ignite change. And so he poured his heart into teaching her, starting with the basics, language, numbers, simple skills. To everyone's surprise, Rhaegar soaked up the lessons like a sponge. Her eyes shone with a fierce intelligence as she mastered concepts at an astonishing rate. Jake's chest swelled with pride as he watched her blossom. However, their growing bond didn't go unnoticed. In the shadows, a sinister figure took keen interest in the unlikely pair. Gorkus, a ruthless Pakled warlord, saw Rhaegar's association with Jake as a threat to the status quo that kept his people subjugated. Bring me the girl, Gorkus rasped to his minions, his cybernetic eye glinting malevolently. Crush this spark before it becomes a flame. In a brutal ambush, Gorkus's thugs descended upon Jake and Rigor. Outnumbered and outgunned, Jake fought like a man possessed, his fists and feet a blur of motion. But even his battle-honed skills weren't enough. A searing pain exploded in his side as a blade found its mark. Through the haze of agony, Jake watched helplessly as the thugs dragged a screaming Rigor away. Blood pooled beneath him, his vision dimming. But even as consciousness faded, a single thought consumed him. He had to save her. Days passed as Jake clawed his way back from the brink, his body battered but his dedication unbroken. Every waking moment was spent gathering intel, tracking leads, pushing past the pain. He couldn't fail Rigor. Whispers began to spread among the pack-led underclass, tales of the human soldier who believed in them, who fought for one of their own. Quietly, carefully, some began to aid Jake in his quest, sharing secrets and resources. Finally, Jake stood at the gates of Gorkus's stronghold, his body coiled with tension. He slipped inside, a silent shadow, ready to face the warlord and rescue Rigor. In the heart of the compound, Jake confronted Gorkus. The warlord lounged on his throne, a cruel sneer twisting his face. You're a fool, human, Gorkus spat. You think you can change the order of things? The pack-lids are meant to serve nothing more. Jake's eyes narrowed. You're wrong. Rigor and her people are capable of so much more, and I'll fight to my last breath to prove it. The battle was joined, man against machine, skill against brute force. Jake ducked and weaved, landing blow after blow, but Gorkus's enhancements made him a formidable foe. The tide seemed to turn against Jake, his strength waning. But in that moment, a fierce cry rang out. Rigor, battered but unbroken, rallied the pack-lid slaves. They surged forward, a tide of fury and desperation, turning the tables on their oppressors. In the chaos, Jake landed a final, devastating blow to Gorkus. The warlord crumpled, his reign of terror ended. As the dust settled, Jake and Rigor stood tall among the cheering pack-lids. A spark had been lit, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But their victory was only the beginning. Jake and Rigor's defiance had set in motion a chain reaction that would reshape the galaxy itself. And as whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire, they knew the fight for pack-lid freedom would be long and perilous. For now, the powerful sought to snuff out this flickering flame. Jake and Rigor were now targets, symbols of a change that threatened the very foundations of the status quo. The battle lines were drawn. The revolution had begun. The abandoned warehouse echoed with the sounds of hushed voices and shuffling feet as Jake addressed the gathered pack-lids. Their eyes shone with a newfound spark of hope and perseverance. We're not stupid. We're not worthless. We're pack-lids, and we deserve respect. Jake's voice rang out firm and passionate. Rigor stood beside him, her chin held high. No longer the cowering child from the alley, she now radiated confidence. We can learn. We can grow. We can fight. A chorus of cheers erupted from the crowd. Jake felt a swell of pride, but it was tinged with unease. Their movement was gaining traction, but at what cost? Suddenly, the warehouse doors burst open. Panic rippled through the crowd as armored figures stormed in, weapons raised. Scatter! Jake yelled, grabbing Rigor's hand and bolting for a side exit. They sprinted through winding alleys, the sound of pursuit close behind. Jake's heart pounded as he pulled Rigor into a hidden alcove, pressing a finger to his lips. Heavy footsteps thundered past. Jake caught a glimpse of their pursuers. Not local authorities, but sleek operatives with advanced tech. The Galactic Council had taken notice. Once the coast was clear, Jake activated his comm unit. Admiral Grayson, this is Reed. We need extraction now. Negative, son. Grayson's gruff voice crackled through. You've kicked the hornet's nest. The Council sent their top agent after you, Zorn. He's ruthless, Jake. You need to go dark. Jake's stomach dropped. He looked at Rigor, her eyes wide with fear but still trusting him completely. He couldn't let her down. Understood, sir. We'll find a way. Read out. For weeks, they lived on the run. Safe houses, backroom deals, narrow escapes. All the while, Jake could feel Zorn's net tightening around them. It came to a head during a raid on a council data hub. Jake and Rigor led a small team, aiming to uncover proof of the council's exploitation. They were almost out when the alarms blared. Jake turned to see a figure step from the shadows, tall, imposing, with cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the low light. So this is the great Jake Reed. Zorn's voice was cold, almost bored. I expected more. Jake pushed Rigor behind him, eyes darting for an escape route. Sorry to disappoint. We're kind of in a hurry, so if you'll excuse us. Zorn moved with preternatural speed, his fist connecting with Jake's jaw before he could react. Jake stumbled back, tasting blood. Run, he shouted to Rigor and the others. Get the data out. What followed was a brutal fight. Jake held his own, but Zorn's enhancements gave him a clear edge. By the time Jake managed to break free and escape, he was battered and bruised. Regrouping at a safe house, Jake nursed his wounds as Rigor pored over the stolen data. Jake, look at this, she gasped, eyes wide. The council, they've been lying to everyone, about us, about everything. Jake leaned in, his pain forgotten as he read the damning evidence. Decades of systematic oppression, resource theft, and cultural sabotage, all to keep the Pakleds down. We have to get this out, Jake said, his voice hard with dedication. To everyone. Rigor nodded, her face set with commitment. The council's main communication hub. If we can broadcast from there. It's heavily guarded, Jake warned. But worth the risk, Rigor countered. For our people, for the truth. Jake couldn't argue with that. They began to plan, knowing the stakes had never been higher. Days later, as they prepared for their most daring mission yet, Jake received an unexpected transmission. Reed, it's Grayson. I've seen the evidence. You were right, son. I'm coming to help. Send me your coordinates. Hope surged through Jake. With Grayson's help, they might just pull this off. But as Jake moved to respond, the console crackled. Zorn's face appeared, twisted in a cruel smile. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Reed. Unless you want to see what's left of your precious admiral. The camera panned to show Grayson, bloodied and bound. Jake's blood ran cold. You have 1 hour to surrender, Zorn continued, or the admiral dies, and your little rebellion with him. The transmission cut off, leaving Jake and Rigor in stunned silence. The fate of the Pakleds, of Grayson, of the entire galaxy now rested squarely on their shoulders. Jake met Rigor's gaze, seeing his own mix of fear and purpose reflected there. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Jake's fist clenched as Zorn's ultimatum echoed through the comm. He locked eyes with Rigor, seeing his own dedication mirrored there. Without a word, Jake sprinted to the nearest console, fingers flying over the keys. What are you doing? Rigor asked, peering over his shoulder. Activating the failsafe, Jake replied, his voice tight with concentration. All that evidence we gathered, it's about to go public. The screen flickered to life, data streams cascading across it. Jake hit the final command, and a progress bar appeared. Upload initiated, the computer intoned. Alarms blared throughout the station. Zorn's enraged voice crackled over the intercom. Stop that transmission at all costs. The door to their chamber burst open, Zorn's troops pouring in. Jake ducked behind a console as plasma bolts sizzled past. Rigor overturned a table, providing cover. We need to hold them off, Jake shouted over the chaos. He popped up, squeezing off shots with his blaster. 2 of Zorn's men went down. Rigor nodded grimly, hefting a makeshift club. A group of Pakled rebels charged in from a side passage, joining the fray. The room devolved into a melee of blaster fire and hand-to-hand combat. Jake fought his way to the main corridor, Rigor at his side. They needed to reach the computer core to ensure the upload completed. As they rounded a corner, the station shuddered violently. Warning klaxons shrieked. Hull breach detected. Emergency protocols engaged. Jake's blood ran cold as he watched entire sections of the station seal off, bodies and debris sucked into the void of space. The corridor ahead was chaos, rebels and Zorn's forces alike scrambling for secure areas. "Jake!" Rieger's panicked voice cut through the din. He turned to see her clinging to a doorframe, the decompression threatening to pull her into space. Jake lunged for her, their fingertips brushing. Another violent shudder rocked the station. Jake slammed into a bulkhead, his vision going dark. When he came to, Rigor was gone. Dazed, Jake staggered to his feet. He had to find her, had to reach the core. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he pressed on. Rigor found herself alone in the bowels of the station, the sounds of battle echoing distantly. She steeled herself, knowing what had to be done. As she neared the computer core, a figure stepped from the shadows. Zorn. "I must admit, I'm impressed," Zorn sneered, his cybernetic eye gleaming. "You packlids aren't as stupid as we thought." Rigor stood her ground. "We never were. You just wanted us to believe that." Zorn lunged, impossibly fast. Rigor ducked, feeling the air displaced by his cybernetic fist. She rolled, coming up with a length of pipe. As Zorn wheeled on her, she swung with all her might. The pipe connected with a satisfying clang, but Zorn barely flinched. He grabbed Rigor by the throat, lifting her off her feet. She gasped for air, clawing at his grip. A blaster bolt seared past Zorn's head. Jake stood in the doorway, weapon raised. "Let her go," he snarled. Zorn hurled Rigor aside, turning to face this new threat. Jake and Rigor fought in tandem, keeping Zorn off balance. But even outmatched, the cyborg was a formidable opponent. As Jake grappled with Zorn, Rigor saw her chance. She dove for the computer terminal, interfacing directly with the system. Her consciousness merged with the station's mainframe, a flood of data overwhelming her senses. Dimly, she heard Zorn's roar of rage. "If I can't stop you, I'll take you all with me." The self-destruct sequence initiated, a countdown appearing on every screen. Rigor's mind raced through the station's systems, fighting to maintain the upload while simultaneously working to halt the self-destruct. It was like trying to solve 1,000 puzzles at once. Jake kept Zorn occupied, leading him on a deadly chase through the station's corridors. Every second he bought was another chance for Rigor to succeed. With a final, desperate push, Rigor broke through the last firewall. The upload completed, broadcasting across every channel in the galaxy. At the same time, she managed to isolate and terminate the self-destruct sequence. The station fell silent. Then reports began flooding in. Uprisings on a dozen worlds. The Council's authority crumbling. And through it all, the truth of their crimes laid bare for all to see. Admiral Grayson's forces swarmed the station, apprehending Zorn and his remaining loyalists. As the dust settled, Jake found Rigor slumped by the terminal, exhausted but triumphant. "We did it," she whispered, a tired smile on her face. Jake helped her to her feet, his own expression a mix of relief and weariness. "Yeah, we did, but this is just the beginning." They made their way to the command center, where view screens showed scenes of celebration and chaos across the galaxy. The old order was gone. What would take its place remained to be seen. Jake and Rigor exchanged a look, knowing the challenges that lay ahead. The fight for true equality and justice. The command center buzzed with frantic activity as Jake hunched over a holographic display, his face etched with exhaustion. Streams of data scrolled by, each new report more dire than the last. He rubbed his bloodshot eyes, trying to focus on the swarm of red indicators representing Ralki fleet movements. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Centauri outpost," a young officer reported, her voice trembling. "That's the third system to go dark this week." Jake's fist clenched. He'd known those people, shared meals with them during the reconstruction efforts. Now they were just another statistic in this brutal war. He forced himself to breathe, to think clearly, despite the weight pressing down on him. "Redirect the 7th Fleet to reinforce the Rigel sector," he ordered. "We can't let them punch through there." As the officer rushed to relay his commands, Jake's gaze drifted to the empty chair beside him. Rigor's absence left a void that seemed to grow with each passing day. He prayed she was safe, knowing the dangers she faced deep in enemy territory. A commotion at the far end of the room drew Jake's attention. Two beings stood locked in a heated argument, a hulking Trandoshan and a willowy Altarian. Their raised voices carried across the command center. "You cowards abandoned us," the Trandoshan snarled, baring razor-sharp teeth. "Where was your precious counsel when the Ralki burned our worlds?" The Altarian, one of the few surviving council members, drew himself up to his full height. "And where were you when we called for aid against the human Pakled insurgency? You reap what you sow." Jake moved swiftly, inserting himself between the two before the situation could escalate further. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "This is exactly what the Ralki want, for us to tear ourselves apart while they conquer everything we've built." The command center fell silent, all eyes on Jake. He looked from face to face, seeing the fear, the anger, the desperation etched in every expression. These were beings who, mere months ago, had been sworn enemies. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder, united by a common threat that promised annihilation for all. "I know there's bad blood between us," Jake continued, his voice low but intense. "But right now, none of that matters. The Ralki don't care about our past conflicts. They'll slaughter us all the same if we don't stand together." The Trandoshan's eyes narrowed, but Jake saw a flicker of understanding there. The Altarian counselor nodded slowly, some of the hostility draining from his posture. "We need each other," Jake pressed on. "Every ship, every soldier, every scrap of intel, it's the only way we survive this." A tense moment passed before the Trandoshan grudgingly extended a clawed hand to the Altarian. "For now," he growled. As the two shook hands, Jake felt a small surge of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He turned back to the holographic display, studying the enemy positions with renewed focus. "Sir!" An aide rushed up, datapad in hand. "We've just received a coded transmission from Agent Rigor." Jake's heart leapt. He snatched the datapad, quickly decrypting the message. His eyes widened as he read Rigor's report, details of Ralki supply lines, fleet deployments, and, most crucially, a potential weakness in their defense grid. For the first time in weeks, a genuine smile crossed Jake's face. He looked up at the assembled beings, humans, Pakleds, and former council races alike, all watching him expectantly. "All right, people," Jake announced, his voice ringing with newfound energy. "We've got work to do. Let's show these Ralki bastards what a united galaxy can do." As the command center erupted into a flurry of purposeful activity, Jake allowed himself a moment of silent gratitude for Rigor's bravery. He only hoped it would be enough to turn the tide of this war before it was too late. Jake's fingers flew across the tactical display, adjusting fleet formations as reports of Ralki incursions flooded in. The command center hummed with tense activity, officers relaying orders and updating battle projections. Jake's eyes burned from lack of sleep, but he forced himself to focus on the holographic map before him. "Sir, we've lost contact with Outpost Sigma," a young lieutenant reported, her voice tight. "The Ralki have breached the Andromeda sector's outer defense perimeter." Jake's fists tight, another system lost, more lives snuffed out. He zoomed in on the affected area, watching as red indicators representing Ralki forces swarmed over Alliance positions. "Redirect the 3rd and 5th fleets to reinforce Andromeda," Jake ordered. "We can't let them push any further into our territory." As the officers rushed to carry out his commands, Jake felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Admiral Grayson, the older man's face etched with concern. "Jake, we need to talk," Grayson said quietly. "In private." They stepped into a small adjacent room, the door hissing shut behind them. Jake leaned against the wall, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him. "We can't keep this up," Grayson stated bluntly. "Our forces are stretched too thin, our resources nearly depleted. If we don't find a way to turn the tide soon..." Jake nodded grimly. "I know, but what choice do we have? We can't just roll over and let the Ralki slaughter billions." The comm unit on Jake's wrist chirped. He answered, and Reger's face appeared on the tiny screen. Her eyes darted furtively, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jake, I have a plan," she said, "but you're not going to like it." As Rigor outlined her audacious scheme to infiltrate the Ralki supremacy, Jake felt his stomach twist. The risks were astronomical, the chances of success slim at best. "No," Jake said firmly. "It's too dangerous. We'll find another way." Rigor's eyes flashed with willpower. "There is no other way, Jake. You know that as well as I do. This is our only chance to strike at the heart of their war machine." Jake opened his mouth to argue further, but Grayson cut him off. "She's right, son. As much as I hate to admit it, this may be our last shot at turning things around." Outvoted and out of options, Jake reluctantly agreed. Over the next few days, he watched helplessly as Rigor made her preparations, working with former council operatives to establish her cover and infiltration route. Each time they spoke, Jake fought the urge to beg her to stay. The night before Reger's departure, Jake found her in the hangar bay, making final adjustments to her small, nondescript shuttle. He stood there for a long moment, watching her work, memorizing every detail of her face. "Promise me you'll come back," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. Rigor turned, her eyes softening as she met his gaze. She stepped close, reaching up to touch his cheek. "You know I can't make that promise, Jake, but I'll do everything in my power to see this through." They embraced fiercely, neither wanting to let go. When they finally parted, Rigor's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Without another word, she climbed into her shuttle and sealed the hatch. Jake stood rigid as the small craft lifted off, disappearing into the inky blackness of space. He allowed himself one moment of anguish before squaring his shoulders and marching back to the command center. There was a war to fight, and he couldn't afford to wallow in fear or grief. Over the next weeks, Jake threw himself into coordinating the Alliance's defensive efforts with renewed vigor. He pored over tactical data, searching for weaknesses in the Ralki's formations, exploiting every opportunity to slow their relentless advance. "Multiple Ralki cruisers detected in the Rigel system," an officer called out. "They're targeting our supply lines." Jake's mind raced, formulating a plan. "Contact the Thalasian Defense Fleet. Have them execute attack pattern Delta 7. We'll catch the Ralki in a pincer movement." As the battle unfolded on the main view screen, Jake felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. His eyes darted from display to display, issuing rapid-fire orders as Alliance ships engaged the enemy. "Concentrate fire on their lead vessel," Jake commanded. "Take out their command and control capabilities." A cheer went up as the Ralki flagship erupted in a brilliant explosion. The remaining enemy ships scattered, retreating in disarray. Jake allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction, but it was short-lived. For every victory they achieved, the Ralki seemed to push ever closer to the Alliance's core worlds. And with each passing day, the gnawing fear for Reger's safety grew stronger. As Jake stared at the star map, plotting their next move, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was rapidly running out. He only hoped that wherever Rigor was, whatever dangers she faced, she would find a way to complete her mission before it was too late for them all. Jake's boots crunched on the moon's rocky surface as he emerged from the salvaged research vessel. The harsh alien landscape stretched out before him, jagged peaks and deep crevasses carved by eons of cosmic bombardment. He scanned the horizon, pulse quickening as he spotted the distant silhouettes of structures, unmistakably human in origin. The Packlet girl stumbled as she exited the ship, her eyes wide and unfocused. Jake steadied her, fighting back a wave of psychic interference that threatened to overwhelm his senses. Fractured images flashed through his mind. Burning worlds, screaming multitudes, an all-consuming darkness. "Easy there," Jake murmured, pushing the visions aside. "We need to move." They hadn't gone more than 100 yards when a high-pitched whine split the air. Jake instinctively dropped to one knee, pulling the girl down with him. A sleek, dart-shaped craft screamed overhead, kicking up a cloud of lunar dust in its wake. "Damn it," Jake hissed. He'd hoped for more time before being detected. The craft banked sharply, coming around for another pass. This time, Jake saw the glint of weapons protruding from its hull. He grabbed the girl's hand and broke into a run, zigzagging towards a cluster of boulders for cover. Energy bolts sizzled past them, superheating the rocky ground. Jake's lungs burned as he pushed himself to the limit, dragging the near catatonic packlet along. They dove behind the boulders just as another volley struck, showering them with molten rock fragments. Jake unslung his rifle, checking the charge. The craft made another pass, hovering this time. A hatch opened, and armored figures began to rappel down. Even at this distance, Jake could see their uniforms were a patchwork of ancient designs and scavenged tech, a twisted echo of Earth's long-dead warrior cultures. "Alien scum!" a voice boomed through an amplifier. "You defile our sacred soil with your presence. Prepare for righteous extermination." Jake's mind raced, assessing options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and had nowhere to run. The packlet girl whimpered, curling into a fetal position. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder, surprised to feel a spark of connection amid the psychic chaos. "I need you to stay with me," Jake said, locking eyes with the girl. "Whatever happens, whatever you see in your mind, focus on my voice. Can you do that?" The girl gave an almost imperceptible nod. It would have to be enough. Jake took a deep breath, then stepped out from behind the boulder, hands raised. "Hold your fire," he shouted. "I'm human, same as you." The Helot warriors paused, clearly taken aback. Their leader, a hulking man with ritual scarification across his face, stepped forward. "Lies," he spat. "No true human would consort with alien filth. You have forsaken your birthright, race traitor." Jake kept his voice steady, buying time as he inched closer to the Helots. "I've come seeking knowledge of the ancients. Surely warriors such as yourselves can appreciate the pursuit of power." The leader's eyes narrowed, considering. Jake tensed, ready to make his move. Suddenly, the packlet girl screamed. Jake felt a surge of psionic energy, raw and uncontrolled. The Helots staggered, clutching their heads. Jake seized the moment, diving for the leader's weapon. They grappled in the lunar dust, neither willing to yield. As they fought, Jake caught glimpses of the ruins looming in the distance. Whatever secrets lay hidden there, he knew the cost of failure would be measured in lives, starting with his own. Jake's muscles screamed as he dragged the pack-led girl behind a crumbling stone pillar. Helot energy bolts sizzled past, scorching the ancient walls. He checked his weapon's charge, nearly depleted. We can't keep this up," Jake muttered, scanning for an exit. The girl's eyes rolled back, her body convulsing. Jake held her steady, feeling the psychic surge building. Suddenly, his mind filled with fractured images, vast machine complexes, stars going dark, civilizations crumbling to dust. Jake shook his head, forcing himself to focus. "I know you're scared," he said softly, "but I need you to concentrate. Remember what we practiced." The girl's trembling fingers found Jake's. He felt a tentative psychic link forming, fragile but growing stronger. Through it, he sensed her terror, but also a desperate desire to help. "That's it," Jake encouraged. "Now can you sense the Helots, their positions?" The girl's brow furrowed. In Jake's mind, ghostly outlines appeared, showing enemy locations throughout the labyrinth. He allowed himself a grim smile. "Good work, now let's move." They crept through winding corridors, narrowly avoiding Helot patrols. Jake's combat instincts, honed by years of war, kept them one step ahead. But their luck couldn't hold forever. As they rounded a corner, Jake came face to face with a hulking Helot warrior. There was a moment of stunned silence before both men reacted. Jake was faster, his fist connecting with the Helot's jaw. They grappled fiercely, crashing into walls covered in inscrutable alien glyphs. The Helot's strength was overwhelming. Jake felt his grip weakening as massive hands closed around his throat. Spots danced in his vision. Suddenly, the Helot stiffened, eyes going wide. He collapsed, revealing the packlet girl standing behind him, a makeshift weapon clutched in her trembling hands. Jake gasped for air. "Thanks," he managed. "We need to keep moving." They pressed deeper into the complex, the architecture growing stranger, more alien. Jake's skin crawled as they passed through chambers filled with bizarre machinery, pulsing with otherworldly energy. A distant explosion rocked the facility. Jake stumbled, steadying himself against a wall. What the hell was that? The answer came in the form of plasma fire erupting from a side passage. Jake shoved the girl behind cover, returning fire. His heart sank as he recognized the unmistakable silhouettes of Ralki combat armor. "This day just keeps getting better," Jake growled. The firefight intensified. Jake caught between Helot zealots and Ralki invaders. He was running out of options when a stray shot struck an ancient control panel. Klaxons blared as hidden defense systems activated. In the chaos that followed, Jake made a snap decision. He grabbed the Pakled girl's hand and sprinted towards the Ralki position. "Don't shoot!" Jake shouted in broken Ralki. "We have mutual enemies!" The Ralki commander, a scarred veteran, hesitated before barking an order to hold fire. Jake approached cautiously, hands raised. "The Helots will overrun us all if we don't work together," Jake explained rapidly. "And there's something much worse beneath this moon. A doomsday weapon that threatens everything." The commander's compound eyes narrowed. "Why should we trust you, human?" Jake met his gaze steadily. "Because if we don't stop it, there won't be a galaxy left to fight over." Tense seconds passed before the Ralki lowered his weapon. "Speak quickly," he hissed. As Jake outlined the situation, fresh alarms echoed through the complex. The girl whimpered, clutching her head. Through their link, Jake saw a vivid image of a massive pyramid, pulsing with malevolent energy. "The control center," Jake realized. "We need to reach it before the failsafe fully activates." The unlikely alliance moved out, fighting their way through waves of frenzied helots. Jake's tactical experience meshed surprisingly well with Ralki battle doctrine. They pushed towards the heart of the facility, leaving destruction in their wake. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber dominated by a towering obsidian pyramid. Its surface rippled with eldritch symbols, a sense of ancient malice radiating from its core. "By the Hive Mother," the Ralki commander breathed. Jake stared up at the monolithic structure, a chill running down his spine. Whatever secrets it held, he knew humanity's fate hung in the balance. Jake's eyes snapped open, his body racked with pain. He lay amidst the smoldering wreckage of the pyramid, acrid smoke stinging his nostrils. Groaning, he pushed himself up, shards of obsidian crunching beneath his hands. The devastation was total. Where the imposing structure once stood, only a crater remained. Bodies of Helot warriors littered the ground. Their fanatical crusade ended in fire and ruin. Jake staggered to his feet, head pounding. Something felt different. A presence lingered at the edges of his consciousness, alien, yet familiar. The Pakled girl. Her essence clung to him like a gossamer web, fragile but undeniably there. "Can you hear me?" Jake whispered, unsure if he was speaking aloud or within his own mind. A flicker of recognition, warmth, fear. The girl's emotions washed over him in waves, raw and unfiltered. Jake pressed a hand to his temple, struggling to process the new sensations. "It's okay," he murmured. "We're alive. We did it." A Ralki soldier approached, chitinous armor scorched and cracked. "Human," the alien rasped. "The extinction wave. Has it been halted?" Jake nodded, wincing at the movement. "Yes, but at great cost." He glanced around, taking in the carnage. "How many of your forces survived?" "Less than a third," the Ralki replied, mandibles clicking in distress. "The Helots fought to the last. Without the pyramid's destruction, we would have been overrun." Jake's gaze swept across the battlefield. Ralki medics tended to the wounded, while others secured the perimeter against any remaining threats. The alliance forged in desperation had held, but its future remained uncertain. He felt a surge of anxiety from the Pakled consciousness nestled within him. Flashes of memory, stars going dark, civilizations crumbling to dust. Jake pushed back against the visions, focusing on the here and now. "We need to contact our respective commands," Jake said, forcing his voice to remain steady. The galaxy needs to know what happened here, and... He hesitated, considering the implications of his next words. They need to know about her, about us. The Ralki tilted its head, compound eyes studying Jake intently. The alien female. You speak as if she still lives. Jake tapped his temple. In a manner of speaking, her mind, her essence, it's here, with me. I don't fully understand it myself. A low hum emanated from the Ralki, a sound Jake had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. Truly, this day has seen wonders and horrors beyond reckoning. Come, human, our long-range communications array survived the battle. We will make contact with your people and mine. As they walked, Jake felt the pack-led girl's presence stirring within him. Curiosity mingled with fear, her alien perceptions coloring his own. He sent soothing thoughts through their fragile bond, even as he grappled with the enormity of what lay ahead. The galaxy had been saved, but at what cost? And what would become of the two souls now inexorably linked, carrying the weight of an entire race's future? Jake squared his shoulders, each step bringing new perseverance. Whatever challenges awaited, he would face them. They would face them, together. Jake stumbled across the scorched landscape, his boots crunching on the obsidian shards that littered the ground. His vision swam, reality flickering in and out like a faulty hologram. He clutched his head, trying to anchor himself to the present, but the psychic trauma threatened to drag him under with each step. Focus, he muttered through cracked lips. Stay here. But where was here? The ruins of the precursor pyramid stretched out before him, a twisted maze of fallen monoliths and shattered technology. Jake's legs gave out, and he collapsed against a chunk of alien metal. His stomach cramped violently, a stark reminder of how long it had been since he'd eaten. In the distance, he caught glimpses of Ralki soldiers. Their chitinous forms blurred and shifted, sometimes appearing as nightmarish apparitions from his fractured memories. One took a hesitant step towards him, mandibles clicking in what might have been concern. "Stay back!" Jake shouted, his voice hoarse and unfamiliar. I'm not... What wasn't he? Human? Sane? Jake couldn't finish the thought as another wave of disorientation washed over him. He felt himself slipping, falling into the abyss of his own mind. Suddenly he was adrift in the void of space. Planets hung before him, once teeming with life, now reduced to lifeless husks. Jake tried to scream, but no sound escaped in the vacuum. Beside him, he sensed the presence of the pack-led girl, her essence intertwined with his own. They bore witness to the extinction wave's relentless march across the cosmos. Civilizations crumbled in an instant, entire species snuffed out like candles in a storm. Jake felt their shared grief threatening to consume them both. "Why?" he cried out in his mind. "Why did it have to be this way?" The vision shifted, and Jake found himself standing before the Galactic Council. He watched in horror as they passed judgment on the Packleds, condemning them to generations of servitude. The scene blurred, replaced by images of Ralki warships obliterating defenseless colonies. "No!" Jake raged against the cycle of violence, feeling the Packled girl's anguish amplifying his own. "This can't be all there is!" He clawed his way back to consciousness, gasping for air. The Ralki soldiers had retreated, leaving him alone among the ruins. Jake's body felt impossibly heavy, as if gravity itself was trying to crush him into the ground. "I can't," he whispered, feeling his grip on reality slipping once more. "I can't hold on." In that moment of clarity, Jake sensed the fragile spark of the Packled girl's consciousness within him. It flickered like a candle in the wind, threatening to go out at any moment. He knew then what he had to do. With the last of his strength, Jake focused his thoughts inward. He gathered the tattered remnants of his psyche, wrapping them protectively around the Packled girl's essence. "Live," he willed her, pouring every ounce of his being into that single command. "For both of us." Jake felt the psychic bond between them stretch and strain. With a final monumental effort, he severed the connection. Pain unlike anything he had ever experienced tore through him. But he didn't fight it. He embraced it, using it to propel the Packled girl's consciousness free from his failing body. As darkness closed in around him, Jake caught a glimpse of something extraordinary. A point of light, brighter than any star, burst into existence where he lay. Within its radiance, he saw the intertwined essences of himself and the Packled girl, swirling in an eternal dance. The light expanded, filling Jake's fading vision. He felt himself becoming a part of it, his consciousness stretching out across the cosmos. His last thought, as his mortal form crumbled to ash, was a profound sense of peace. The newborn star rose into the void, its light reaching out across the devastated worlds. In its wake, the surviving Ralki soldiers stood in awe, bearing witness to something beyond their comprehension. The cosmic dawn of a new age had begun, born from the sacrifice of a broken soldier and the enduring spirit of a people thought lost.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.